Welcome back. So now we're going to talk about the last of the kind of dynamic environmental forces, and this is the internal environment. I also call this the business environment. So you basically have in a corporation, let's see, we go all the way here. In a corporation, the internal environment consists of kind of different groups: employees, managers, board of directors, and owners. Let's talk about those a little bit. Actually, let me write them up here. So you've got, of course, employees. Make sure it's ready. Okay, you've got employees, managers. Got your board of directors, and of course the owners. Okay. Now, each of these groups has different objectives, beliefs, different needs, and functions that, of course, kind of have to be coordinated back and forth. And the forces in external environments seem to have reduced the power of these groups recently. Okay. The dynamics between these two groups greatly contributes to the study of corporate governance, which is actually the last lecture of this course. So we'll talk an awful lot about that as well. So some of you may be thinking, this kind of seems to look like some of the stuff with the models. Well, if you're thinking that, you'd actually be right. This actually looks very similar to the market capitalism model in many ways, because these deep historical forces are very similar to things that would set the rules of the socio-political game. Okay? This would very much look like things that would also impact the rules of the market, and of course this would also look at how businesses would interact with the market and the socio-political environment. You could also argue that under the stakeholder model, you have the business in the middle, and you also have different actors from the external environment who would be your stakeholders, right? And these deep historical forces might be impacting what you might say tertiary stakeholders or even secondary stakeholders, depending on how you look at it. And the same thing with the countervailing forces model. You could argue, well, you got these three kind of dynamic groups, and then they're kind of pulling on each other, and who has dominance, you're not quite sure. And I suppose even under the dominance model, you would also have this, possibly where this would be the environmental piece, the environmental forces in the background, and then this might be a refinement of those environmental forces, and then the pyramid itself would be this internal piece here. So there's a variety of different ways to actually look at that. So environments of business have a very profound impact on managers, however you look at it. And as a manager, you need to be able to balance these or control them to your benefit. And the rules governing these levels of analysis are always changing. Okay, so while business may at one point seem to be underneath, it can always rise up to the top, etc., etc. So the rules are always changing. Okay. One thing that I must point out, and I must stomp to emphasize this: the divide between these is not as neat as we've just made it look. Okay, you can have a manager who you could argue is actually a deep historical force. Okay, think of someone like Rockefeller or Vanderbilt, or if you want to look in more contemporary settings, think of someone like Steve Jobs or Richard Branson. Okay, yeah, it's true. They are, I guess you could say, they're managers. They're probably on a board of directors, and they're usually owners of their corporations. They were probably even employees at one time. Okay, and they are great leaders who have introduced new forms of technology. They have changed dominant ideologies. They have contributed to industrial or even technological revolutions. They've contributed to inequality. They've influenced governments and legal and had impact. So, I mean, it's not always as black and white as we might say. Or certain governments may wind up changing dialogue of nation states, which therefore has some sort of an impact on internal environment. So we only make them look like neat devices to facilitate discussion. Okay, they're not always as clear-cut as they seem. Okay? So now you're probably wondering, great, why did he talk about all this? Well, this is a source for generating variables for scenario building, which is the subject of our next lecture. So I hope you found this lecture informative and entertaining, and our next lecture will be one of my favorite topics, scenario building, and something that also is a tool specifically showing you what to do with these kind of theoretical ideas. So I'll wrap it up here. I'm Duncan Pelly. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.